Yeah, government can be pretty bad. At least with private business, we have a choice of how and where we spend our money and not have to worry about it going down a rat hole. And nowadays, we got to be careful about our money. You know, getting free refills on iced tea is about the only deal I've found out there. And I don't know about you, but I'm watching every dime. So it probably costs them, what, a nickel? They charge $2.50. So even if I drink 10 glasses, they're still way ahead. Not that I'd ever drink 10 glasses. But it's nice to know that both sides of the transaction gets to feel like a winner. And we've got to save money somewhere because prices are going up and going through the roof on everything. Meat prices, food prices, restaurants are closing. We're just about at the point where we can't afford to go out to eat anymore. Although we can still buy stuff on a credit card. But then we're going to be into the banks again. And don't forget, last time, they foreclosed on a whole bunch of people who were into them for too much. And buying food on credit can add up. It seems like the price of gas was driving everything higher and was taking all that money out of the economy. But even the price of ethanol is going up in spite of all the subsidies we give farmers to grow the corn that makes it. And then they made it mandatory as an additive for gas, thanks to those senators from the Corn Belt, even though we're producing more oil than ever. It's like we have a choice of having them use the corn for fuel for our cars or feed for our cattle. And you'd think with the competition for corn, they'd actually use oats in something like that's named Honey Bunches of Oats instead of using corn. All these years I thought the price of that cereal went up because oats were getting scarce. But as it turns out, it's just about all corn. And that's what was going up because of all the ethanol we're using. There's also no such thing as cheap dog food anymore, since corn's also its main ingredient. You know, at least they could cut the taxes on gas we're buying or keep drilling for more oil so we only need to use corn for food products. Or do something so we'd have something left in our pockets to spend. That's if we could ever get those politicians to let go of the use of corn for fuel, which was put on there because we didn't have enough oil. And the states needed the revenue from selling corn at a premium price. You know, it seems like every decision being made by these politicians we elect has something to do with how the federal, state, or local governments can make money. It's like there's a competition to see who can take the most money home. And to them, home isn't where we live. It's where their government resides. Come on, put some money back in our pockets so we can stimulate the economy and aren't borrowing so much to pay these costs of living that keep going up and up. It's gotten to the point where it's good news to hear the post office is thinking about cutting the number of days they're going to deliver the mail since I have an anxiety attack every time I go to the mailbox and see all those bills. I didn't realize how much I was spending just on living. I was thinking the other day that sometimes we get so busy trying to keep track of how the government's screwing us, we forget we have to watch every little thing in our lives that costs us money. I mean, I got so preoccupied with the trillions the federal government's spending putting us into debt that I took my eyes off the corporations and utilities trying to pad their profits at my expense. Yeah, padding their profits at our expense. So let me tell you what I did. I started double checking the invoices and bills I get to make sure I'm not charged for something I didn't receive or I don't need. And I bet if you check, you'll find something wrong that's costing you and probably everybody else out there. Then multiply it by millions and millions of folks being cheated, and you have a reason for someone to cheat you. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I was in the bathroom reading the details of my bills since that's the only extra time I could locate to examining utility bills to my already overwhelmed schedule. So anyway, I found a $6 monthly charge on my phone bill for something called a linebacker fee. I kept thinking linebacker, linebacker, linebacker. Did the phone company have a football team and need to pay for an all-star linebacker and decide to do it with a surcharge on my phone bill and your phone bill? Well, I guess if you're a big football fan, it might make sense. Anyway, I checked. And even though there was no record of my ever requesting it, it was considered insurance. Should anything ever go wrong with the phone wiring inside the walls of my house. Yeah, inside the walls, inside my house. Now, I've never heard of anything happening to the phone wiring inside the walls of a house that wasn't already covered by homeowners insurance, like a fire, or I guess a tornado, or car crashing into a living room. So since I didn't have any record of my ordering such a service, and the phone company didn't either, I demand the charge be removed from my bill and that I receive a credit for the amount I paid for the previous 10 years of billing. Yeah, 10 years they were charging me. But they weren't about to refund that much money, and said it was my responsibility to check my bill every month to see what I was being charged. Yeah, my responsibility to see if they're cheating me. So they only gave me a 3-month credit. Of course, I was furious. I was screaming and yelling. I mean, it went on for a long, long time. And yeah, I started checking my bill. That was over 10 years ago. Anyway, so then over the past few years, I started worrying again about all my other problems and whether the country was going to survive, and Obamacare and the national debt and all the wars going on, with my only phone concern being whether NSA was tapping it. So I took my eye off my bills again. I mean, there was no way they were going to mess with me again. They knew, I knew. So they talked me into adding broadband for my internet. So I'm not thinking too much about why my bill is a little higher. That is until they made a mistake and overcharged me for the broadband, with which I am immediately on top of. I think I was the first person to notice the overcharge because of my focus. So as I'm checking through the rest of my bill, I get to the very end and find a hidden $8 monthly charge for conference calling from a company I'd never heard of. When I checked through my records, I found it was added over a year before I noticed it. Of course, the phone company said they assumed I had begun to have a lot of conference calls, and they just added it on my bill to help out this independent company in its collections. So I thought, how nice of them to help out a needy company. Anyway, it turns out the phone company is paid a hefty percentage of the money it collects for companies that can think up scams like this. I mean, do you check your bill to see if there's conference calling way at the end? No, you don't. Can you imagine this stuff goes on? And then they tried to use the deal again, explaining that it was my responsibility to check my bill, until I threatened to go to the Utility Commission. Then they agreed to give me credit since they didn't have a record of my making any conference calls. Now, like I said, take the $8 that they charged me, and multiply it by millions and millions, and when you figure the phone company's cut, it makes sense for them to scam us. Of course, some of us might think, well, it's only $8. That's what they're hoping we think, since most folks would notice a $100 increase and fight to get a refund. So anyway, the $8 takes a long time, by the way, to get the whole deal refunded and done. But I get all this stuff resolved, and I compare it to my old bill and realize it still seems higher than the $8 a month they were refunding me. Guess what? They had charged me again for that linebacker fee for another year, but this time it was hidden in some long verbal description of their services. It didn't even say the amount. I guess they figured if they were going through the trouble of adding on that conference call fee, they might as well take the opportunity to sneak the linebacker fee back in. Come on. I know I'm supposed to check my bill, but give me a break if it doesn't show up at the top of the things I have to do in my life. My bucket list. So I figured enough fooling around with these guys. And with all the complaining I do about government regulation, finally I saw the need for it. That's until the government regulators agreed with the phone company that I should only receive another 3-month refund, since it's my responsibility as a consumer to keep track to make sure that overcharges or mistakes aren't made on my bill. Are you kidding me? It's like they figured out that we're so distracted with entertainment and our financial desperation and everything else going on with our country and the world that we're vulnerable to their bookkeeping. Of course, some of us are so consumed with football, I guess, that anything sounds like a football player can't be a bad investment. I mean, it's crazy. A state regulation commission with oversight over a regulated monopoly siding with a swindle against the public. Whose side is the government on? I can tell you when it comes to big business, it's not on our side. And how many millions of people get screwed by this corporate greed and corruption? And how many billions and billions of dollars are taken out of the pockets of consumers who could use it to help stimulate the economy? I wonder sometimes if this is still America. Is this what corporate morality has become? We're allowing theft to be justified until they're caught, and then putting a limit on their exposure. Oh, and let's not just pick on the poor phone company. I guess it's up to us consumers to check up on all these regulated monopolies when there's no competition for us to go to. It's become us against them, and big government and big business seem to be united. They are united. Oh yeah. Someone was just explaining to me about how these utility companies also collect taxes for the government. Check your bill for that. Maybe that's why the government doesn't want you getting credit for additions to your bills that you don't know about. They figure if you start getting credit for things that these companies sneak on, pretty soon you'll catch on how many taxes and fees the government snuck on over the years. You know, you'd think those people we elected, these politicians that we elected, would be helping make things less expensive for us, so we'd have more money in our pockets. But to them, I guess it's just another tax that we don't think about. And since they worked it out so we don't notice, maybe we also won't notice how much money these utilities and their lobbyists spend on congressmen and their campaigns. But to us average Joes, it just seems like somehow we have less money to spend. We don't know. And then we wonder, when these utilities apply for a rate hike, how can the government ever side with them? Since every time that happens, we know their executives are going to get all kinds of raises and bonuses. And those of us who are represented by these elected officials making the decisions end up paying for it. What we don't know is that the government has the same kind of deals the companies using a utility to collect those hidden charges. But this time their collection of taxes and fees helps pay for the operation of the regulators who are supposed to be protecting our interests. So the government and the utilities are in bed together against us. And when the added fees and taxes are based on a percentage, the higher the bill, the higher the tax. Uh-oh. I mean, this stuff is driving me crazy. And you would think these folks that represent us would hear us screaming and do something about it. But nobody complains because it involves businesses that fund politics. So I guess it's another variation of the new capitalism. Well, by the way, with all the complaining I did on that phone company deal, somehow a mistake was made and I wasn't listed in next year's phone book. Oh, they don't forget. They don't forget. Because this past year, they said I was 2 weeks late paying my phone bill, which is paid 2 weeks in advance, which I have been doing for 30 years. Well, they ended up disconnecting my service. Unfortunately, my service was bundled together, including my cell phone and the internet and cable TV. If you think having your heat or electricity turned off is a really bad thing to happen because of their necessity to your survival, try being without a phone, a computer, and a cell phone. And the only number you could dial is the phone company. And then you get so mad explaining how you paid your bill on time and that they had made a mistake, you think you're having a heart attack. And then you have no way to call or contact anyone except, yeah, you guessed it, the phone company. Of course, their advice would be to take 2 aspirin, pay your bill, and call us in the morning, if you can. if you can. And then after you get your service turned on, you decide to check your cell phone bill, and you find out that while your service was disconnected with the regular phone company, you were charged for something called Jamster that apparently had a ringtone with some great hip-hop tunes. So then another argument ensues, and as you begin to try and explain that you don't even know what Jamster or hip-hop is. That goes on for hours until finally, an older supervisor believes you. I guess I was just lucky. It wasn't a Frank Sinatra ringtone. And since I know it'll sound like overkill, and how this stuff couldn't be happening to one person to be true, I guess I shouldn't even mention the next generation cell tower that they built next to my house that has enough radiation streaming into my living room to cause brain cancer. And that's according to national scientific studies. And how they're allowed to do it is because there's a Telecommunications Act that says, our Congress passed, that says cell towers cannot be stopped from being built because of health and safety reasons, because they have the level reached so high that it can kill you, and you can't do anything about it. I swear. And you don't think the government will kill us to satisfy demands of big business? Check it out. And all the other diseases and conditions that they think it causes. It's true. Google it. So after all the time and stealing and screaming and disconnections and radiation, we got to somehow show them that they can't do this to people. And they drive you crazy. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I check my phone bill every month just hoping they put that linebacker fee back on so I can let out all this built up anger and rage by destroying the walls inside my house.